Hi, everybody, and welcome to our final episode of Biology Bios for the spring of 2024. This has been our first experiment in showing a little peek behind some of the science that goes on in our weekly seminars in the Department of Biological Sciences here at the University of Memphis, getting to know those researchers a little bit more, hearing what makes them really excited and the sort of advice they have for people that are coming up in biology today. I'm excited about this last episode. It's coming a bit late. End of semester things happened, as we know they do. But Dr. Mariel Pfeifer came and visited a few weeks ago. We sat down actually in the same room for the first time for one of these, which I really liked. And she talked about her cool work in biology education research and how she got to where she is. So I hope you enjoy this final episode, and we'll look forward to seeing you next fall. Dr. Mariel Pfeifer, welcome to Biology Bios.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm pretty excited. This is the first interview for Biology Bios that we have been able to be in the same room for. So they're normally on Zoom, so this is extra fun. So what I like to do generally to get started is just a brief introduction, if you could say who you are, like your position, and sort of broad brushstrokes what you study.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Mariel Pfeifer, and I'm an assistant professor of biology at the University of Mississippi. And I am a biology education researcher. And so I study, right now, I'm doing a lot of work looking at the experiences of STEM students with disabilities. And I've also started to do a little bit of research in the science identity space of like upper division undergraduates and graduate students, and how kind of their conceptions of what it means to be a science researcher changes over time and how that influences how they see themselves.
Cool. Excellent. Okay, so within that space that you're describing, do you have, and I guess not giving too much away about your talk, do you have maybe one or two projects that you're especially jazzed about right now, and why are you so excited about those?
Yeah, so right now I'm really excited about two projects kind of within the STEM students with disabilities sphere. And one of them, I guess they're both collaborations, and so that is really fun. I think as an assistant professor, it's been really cool to like be able to find your own collaborations and to kind of navigate. Like, it's challenging, but it's also really exciting. And so one of those collaborations, we're working with researchers, like chemistry education researchers, and we're looking at how neurodivergent students decide to disclose or not within group work settings in their STEM courses. Okay. And so that's been really fascinating. And it's kind of related to some of the work I've done previously.
Yeah, I was going to say, so you had looked at that sort of in a biology realm, but this is taking that broader, yeah?
Yeah. And so my previous work, we did look at STEM majors broadly, but most of them were life science majors. And we didn't like delve into one specific practice. So we looked really broad. So like in an active learning classroom, like there was a number of things that people talked about. Right. Group work was one of them. And so now I think of it like we're kind of like zooming in on group work and seeing what's happening there. And so that's been pretty enlightening to see like what people's experiences are and why they do or do not disclose in that setting. And so that's a project we've started, and we're collaborating, and that's great. And then the other project is also within the STEM disability space, and we're doing some systematic reviews with some folks at UT Austin, and we're looking at, this is like nerdy biology education research stuff, but we're looking at the theoretical frameworks that have been used to design studies about students with disabilities across the literature. So looking at all STEM majors and even like some more disability-focused journals and things like that.
Kind of for my own interest, as well as like, so I'm hoping that we get a bunch of undergrads that will listen to this as well. A systematic review. Like,
yeah.
Can you tell a little bit more about systematic review versus meta-analysis versus just review?
Yeah. So I will do my best, and I will say that I'm still learning a little bit about this, but Okay, so a systematic review is where you have a very specific set of search terms that you're using, and you're going to have you take a lot of time to develop those search terms. And you might work with a librarian to help you come up with those, and then to identify your specific databases that you're going to go through. And then you're going to get probably thousands of hits off of that.
Yeah.
And then you systematically go through all of them to remove duplicates and to make sure that they're relevant to what your actual research question is.
Gotcha.
And that might be in contrast to what some people might call, I think some people call a theoretical review, where you do have terms, but it's not as extensive and comprehensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like the reviews that I've written are more kind of centered around, here's an idea I have, and I'm going to throw in some things to support it. But I'm not actually looking to see whether this idea is supported generally through the literature. I'm definitely not doing meta-analyses of saying I'm going to analyze prior studies. I'm just here's some things that make sense. What do y'all think? And you kind of throw it out in the world.
Yeah. And that has been my own experience too, doing some previous review work. And I think part of your question was maybe how that's different from a meta-analysis.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the work that I'm doing for the systematic review, it's a mixture of quantitative and qualitative work.
Okay.
So my understanding is for a true meta-analysis, you would probably have just all quantitative pieces.
Right.
And so that we're not going to do that. And people should definitely double check me that is accurate. There's some different definitions of what people consider to be a meta-analysis or not. So, but yeah, that would be some of the differences there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk more about you as a scientist. So was there a time in your growing up or in your education that you were I'm gonna be a scientist? This is it? Or was it a slow burn, or how did you get to be where you are?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think kind of both. So I've always been really interested in science, as long as I can remember. But I think the moment where I was this is cool, was in 5th grade.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And I got to do the science fair project. And so I'm from a very rural place, and we didn't get to do science fair projects every year. So it was kind of a special thing that happened. And at the time, my mom was working for DEQ, which I think is the Department of Environmental Quality, not as a scientist, but in the office. And so she was telling me about water quality. And so I got to go out and for my science fair project, collect water samples and then look at them under the microscope. And it was just really cool. I just kind of fell in love with seeing things under the microscope.
Even now, knowing that if I go out and look at pond water, there's going to be a bunch of stuff going on.
Yeah.
It's still cool.
It is still cool.
Right?
Yeah.
And I still think Daphne are some of the coolest things in the world.
They're lovely. They're wonderful to look at under the microscope. Yeah.
That's so cool. Okay. Yeah. So that was the sort of spark.
Yeah. And I think after that, I don't know, then I was okay, you're interested in science. And so I kind of started to seek it out more. Mm-hmm. And I was really fortunate to have some really great science teachers. And so I always was at the same time very interested in education. And so I wanted to be a high school biology teacher. And then in college, that kind of shifted for me. But yeah, that's kind of my trajectory there.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, so this one I'm getting better at asking, but is a little bit weird.
Okay.
Well, not weird, but I stumble on it. So much of what we do in science, you get reviews back. There are people always evaluating your work. In addition to that, we often, or at least I have, a active inner critic that, is telling me oh, I don't know about that idea, or oh, don't try that. That's too risky, or that, it's second guessing. And I'm curious, how do you deal with that inner voice that second guesses and criticizes?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's something that me personally, I've gotten more strategies on how to handle that over time.
That makes sense.
And so I try to, for myself, okay, so I guess I think my inner critic is the most harsh. Yeah.
Often,
So I think that one is honestly like the more challenging part of that for me. And so I try to think like I try to talk myself down, I guess, like when I'm being very critical, and I would say, okay, like, would you be this critical of someone else's idea?
Yeah.
And oftentimes, no.
Oh, yeah.
And then I try to understand where some of that criticism is coming from. And for me, I tend to be a very anxious person. And so I'm like, oh, it's actually because I'm a little bit afraid. Mm-hmm. And that kind of changes the conversation, right?
Yeah, in
your head.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, so what am I afraid of? And then thinking about that and then trying to decide if that's realistic or not. Mm-hmm. And then in some cases, it might be that I'm like, I don't have the resources that I need maybe to do that thing. And so then I can think about, okay, like, how could you get that resource?
Yeah, that's really great. Like, it's kind of, I don't know, to me, I feel like a lot of this is slowing these things down.
Yeah.
Because, like, you get stuck in these loops, and it's just, I don't know, it's almost like when you wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, oh, did I forget to do a thing? And then you keep planning and you're like, wait, how can I? And it's like, I don't need to keep doing this, you know? If I could just slow down and be like, all right, write down the thing that I need to do tomorrow. Go back to bed, you know?
Yeah.
And I feel like that this is similar, like breaking it down. That sounds like such a good strategy. I really like that tool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing that I remind myself of is it's emergent, right? Like, you're not going to know all of the things or have all of the, like, so you got to be able to respond, and you have to kind of have a clear head to respond in a way that's proactive and not reactive.
Yeah.
And so that's another part of my like inner monologue. I'm like, okay, is this reactive? Is this proactive? Like, maybe I need to take a day to think about it. Yeah. And then for reviewers, like, I think there's usually an emotional response that happens, you know, when you get that list of all the things that might need to be better about your paper or about whatever you've submitted.
Yep.
But then, yeah, I guess I use a similar strategy. I take some time to kind of let the emotions happen.
Yeah. And
then be like, okay, I had one of my advisors gave me a very specific set of steps to handle, so that's what I use. Yeah.
For reviews in particular?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's actually a really good idea. That's interesting. I haven't broken that down like that. But I mean, what you're talking about of taking the time to have the emotional response, because intellectually we can be like, these are criticisms of ideas or of execution of ideas. These are not personal attacks.
Yeah.
Though, you know, some reviews can very much feel like they're bordering on that, or maybe they are that. But yeah, that time, and I feel like I talk with students about this, but I actually think writing down those steps, that's a really good idea.
Yeah. And so kind of the rule that I personally follow is you look at the reviews, you take maybe up to 48 hours to feel how you're going to feel about them. And then you come back to them. And then what I like to do is I organize all of the comments. And then the first thing I do is I'll just be like, is this easy or hard to deal with? And I'll actually write easy, hard, easy, hard. And then I'll go through and I'll do, at different times I'll do it differently. But sometimes I'm like, all right, I'm just going to start with all the easy stuff.
That really appeals to me.
Yeah.
Because I feel like so much of any project for me is the activation energy.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I have these reviews to deal with. But if you have those easy ones where it's fix this period, I think you cited the wrong thing here. Okay, that's super easy to fix. And now you're doing it.
Yes.
Before you know it, you're already in, that activation energy is gone. You're doing the thing.
Yeah. And it kind of, exactly like you're saying. And it kind of gets, for me, the ball rolling in my head about how I might want to handle the hard stuff, and to come up with some good strategies. And also to figure out, you probably don't have to do all of the things that the reviewers are asking. And so really thinking through what's reasonable and what do I actually agree with.
Yeah.
Versus, what am I just like, and we all, at least for me, like, there always are some things that you just do because the reviewer asks you to do it.
Yeah.
But then being strategic, like, okay, if I do this, then I can probably push back on that other thing a little bit.
Right. Have you seen that meme? It's old at this point. It's like a pizza, and it's like, this is the paper before review. And then it's like after review, it's like half of the pizza has like a whole chicken on it, and then there's M&Ms and gummy worms on another part. It's like, yeah, you don't want to end up doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Or like in one of the grad classes I took, one of our professors would always ask us, like, okay, so what experiments did they do after the reviewer asked? Try to guess what that was.
That's funny. That's funny. I mean, and then there are the things, though, that where you're just like legit, you're like, that's an excellent point.
Yeah.
This paper's better now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, that's really how I try to think about the reviews. Like, this is an opportunity to strengthen the work, and there might be holes here that I missed. And I'm so glad that this came up in review before this was published. And so,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so thinking back a little bit, so this maybe this is kind of filling in a little bit of like your development as a scientist, because I'm going to ask you if you met yourself in today's world, but a 20-ish year old version of yourself, undergrad version of yourself. Okay. What advice would you have for that person?
Oh my gosh. So I don't think I talked about this in my like trajectory, but like the first 2 years of college for me were really rough. And so
not uncommon.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, it's hard, like you're learning how to study maybe in your science classes the first time. You're like maybe rethinking that major that you came in so excited about.
I know I got hit with a hard dose of reality that like I was pretty good at high school, and then I got to college and I was like, oh, everybody here's like smart and this is hard. Oh no.
Yes. Yeah, that was very similar to me. And then realizing like, I think for me, I had a realization. It's like, everyone in this room is smart. It's not necessarily about being smart anymore. It's about working and learning how to study and like applying yourself in a way that you haven't applied yourself before. And so if I were to see my 20-year-old self, I would say like, stick with it. Like, it's going to be okay. It's hard right now, but you're going to turn a corner and you're going to find something that you get really excited about. And I would also probably tell my 20-year-old self about the field of biology education research, because I did not know that was a thing at that time.
I feel like, like the people that I talk about biology education research with, this is often the case, right? Because you come in, like you were doing plant biology, right?
Yeah.
And then, wait, there's this other thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, I would be like, hey, maybe go check out this person, go talk to that person. Because I had, like I said, I know I've always been really interested in science and education, but it's been a meandering path to get to graduate school and to get to where I'm at today. And so I'm probably also talking to my 20-year-old self about that too. Like, it's a process. It's not just going to happen.
I feel like I don't know, that might be unfair. Many of us have meandering paths. Yeah,
and that's what makes it exciting and cool and interesting. And like, I think even though it took me a while to go to graduate school personally, like I really value those experiences that I've had, because I think it gives me a different perspective. And like, honestly, like a lot of appreciation for like the flexibility we have in academia. And to be a professor, right? There's a lot of privilege to be able to do research that you get so excited about, and to work with students and to teach. Like, it's lovely. It's exciting.
Yeah. It's good to hear you say that, and it's good to remind myself of that. And I think for all of us to do that, like, there's so many logistical, like, bureaucratic things that are not very fun that maybe we didn't learn about in graduate school, and we're like, oh wait, now I'm a small business owner, I have to learn budgets. But like, at the end of the day, you get to have some of these conversations, or you get to like with me, I get to go outside and chase critters around and try to figure out what they're doing, and you get reminded of that. You're like, okay, this is actually a pretty cool gig.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think the budget thing is making me think about, this is my first semester as a PI. So yeah, a lot of those things.
I didn't realize this was your first semester. Oh, congratulations, by the way.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah, it's exciting. So I try to be like, when I am feeling maybe a little overwhelmed by all the bureaucratic things, just to be like, hey, like there's parts about this that you really are so privileged to get to be able to do. And like, it's cool that you can pursue your passion in this way and like teach other people about it too.
And that meandering path thing, like that holds, right? Like there are lots of chapters in our careers, and like I definitely remember the first semester as a PI being like, I have to do everything right now.
Yeah.
and that is patently not the case. But I definitely remember that feeling like in my gut, and now being able to be like, yeah, no, you can do things in sequence, and that's okay. Like, it doesn't have to be everything Tuesday.
Yeah.
Which, honestly, is still a good reminder. I guess I still get caught in that trap.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's interesting because just kind of, this first semester being a PI, like at other transitions in my life, there's been like some more guidance, I would say. And so then you have to really remind yourself like, okay, this isn't all just going to be like, my lab is not just going to immediately be set up. Yep. Right. Yep. Like, and it's going to take a little bit of time to get it how I like it. And so just kind of giving yourself a little bit of grace, or that's the conversation I have in my head, trying to get.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes total sense. I don't know. I feel like there's also, as like going on in academia, like you always have kind of cohorts, like as an undergrad, as a graduate student, then like as a postdoc, not always, because postdocs kind of come in at any given time, and there might be more or fewer of them in a department. And then as a PI, like very few of you come in at the same time, or like, I mean, at Mississippi, like a bunch of you came in at the same time, but you're scattered across a bunch of departments, right? So it's not like you have three. Well, actually, I don't know. I never had like three brand new professors in my department that were doing the exact same thing as I was. And it was like, oh.
I would say, so I guess I'm a little bit unique because so I joined in the spring semester, but 2 assistant professors started in the fall in my department. Nice. And one of them is another biology education researcher.
Oh, that's great.
It is helpful. They have been helpful, but we're all still doing our own things. And so there's some support there for sure. Yeah. But then there's other things where you're like, okay, I guess like we're all just figuring this out.
Yeah, you're going to get that. Well, I think so those are my like core questions. One thing that I like to ask is, what have I not asked that you wish I would have asked?
I guess I feel like it was pretty good. Yeah. I'm kind of drawing a blank. What have other people said? I'm curious.
That's a great question. Heather Bergen-Roller said, well, I'll just tell you a little bit about work-life balance.
Okay.
And I'm trying to think. That's the one that sprung to mind. So, like, I do feel like it's a pretty good, like, question to be like, so what else do you do? We've talked a lot about biology and biology education research. Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. I love Heather. She's
great. Awesome. Yeah. So outside of work, so right now, I'm a first-time homeowner and a new PI all at the same time. And so like, maybe that's a little boring, very pedestrian, but I'm just like trying to like learn how to do that as well.
So lots of YouTube videos on how do I fix
how do I fix this? How like getting estimates for things and being like, do I really need someone to do this, or could I like learn how to do it?
Right, that's such a balance.
Yeah,
you're never gonna find anybody that cares quite as much as you do.
Exactly.
And I find myself in the like, but boy, it's going to be real hard for me to learn how to do that thing, and figuring out what that balance is.
Yeah. So like that's been a lot of it, and just kind of getting settled. Like I moved in January to where I'm living now. And so like I think a lot of it has just been kind of trying to like get established, like set up a life, right? Like it's not just about work. It's about trying to have a community and to have like a place you can relax when you get home after work. So that's what I've been doing. I also have a dog and 2 cats. And so like being a pet guardian takes up a lot more time than I would like to admit.
Oh no, I'm with you. I'm with you. We often we often discuss with our dog, like, come on, man, we don't have kids. Why are you demanding so much of our time?
Yeah. Yes. That's exactly it. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for doing this, and thanks for doing it live in person, like at the drop of a hat. I think this has been extra fun.
Yeah.
And then, I will. You're going to be talking later this afternoon. I don't, unfortunately, think I'm going to be able to get this out to the world before your talk, but for folks, having seen your talk, they'll be able to kind of listen back on this and kind of get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. It's been really fun.
All right, like I mentioned, that was our final episode for the spring of 2024. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will look forward to many more exciting conversations in the fall of 2024 and beyond. Again, big thanks everybody for giving us a listen.